The Tao of Self-Confidence, Episode 911. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits. Pre-order a copy of Bridging the Confidence Gap, How Empowered Women Change the World on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, and all major book retailers worldwide. Well, hello, friend. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. I'm your host today, Sheena Yap Chan, and today I have another amazing lady on the show today. She is the Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Quick Confidence. Super excited to have her on today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Selena Rezvani. Hi, Selena. How are you today? Maybe you can fill in a little bit more about yourself to the listeners.
Yeah, Sheena, thank you so much for having me and for all that you do to lift up women everywhere. Thank you for that. Yeah, well, I have the pleasure of being an author of this book, Quick Confidence, which is just a year old. And I really came to that because as a young MBA student, I found myself so interested, almost obsessed with women who were at ease with their power. For example, women leaders, in the corporate space. And I wanted to learn from these women. I thought, what makes them tick? What would they recommend to younger women in their careers, to kind of accelerate their path? And I started reaching out to them one by one as part of a research project. And I'll never forget, I had one female professor at my business school who said, Selena, I'll approve this research on one condition. She said, you have to go after the women executives you think will say no, who won't even entertain your pitch email. If you do that, you can pursue this line of research. And thank goodness for her, Dr. Lindsay Thompson, because she pushed me in a way I wouldn't have pushed myself. And I got an incredible education from what was 30 interviews with top women leaders. And it really changed my life. It opened my eyes to leadership and behaviors. And I thought, I am not that unique. And so I pitched my first book to a publisher, and that was the basis for it. And that book became a mission to help women carve out paths to the top. It became a business. 4 books later, I'm writing my 4th book today. It's become a life. So it's such an honor to get to work on that mission to train and coach women leaders across industries.
I love it. And it's such a great story. And, I like to say we're both author sisters because we come from the same publisher. And I love that there's more women out there like yourself talking about confidence, especially for women leaders, especially for women of color, just because the numbers are still very low. So thank you for the work that you do. And Selena, what's your cultural background?
It's hard for most people to guess. I'm half Pakistani, so that's on my dad's side. And then my mom was born in the US. My dad immigrated here, but my mom was born here to Ukrainian immigrants. So they could not have had more different upbringings, regions of the world they're from. And what an incredible place to grow up, right? All of that in the middle of the Philadelphia suburbs, So I will say, though, just wanting to be really candid, when you grow up in a multi-ethnic family, you can sometimes really search for belonging more. I know that was the case for me. I never felt like a full card-carrying member of my dad's world, nor did I feel like one of my mom's. And so I think that scratched the itch, I think a little bit for me early on to want to seek out, what is this belonging thing, whether it's at work, whether it's in your personal life and your identity, like what gives us those feelings of belonging to something?
Thanks for sharing that. And, a lot of women on the show who are biracial, multiracial, they had similar issues as well. They had never felt like they belonged to one culture or the other. And I also have biracial nieces and nephews, right? I always want to make sure it's a bonus. They belong to two cultures instead of none. So I'm glad that you're able to share this because I know some of the listeners out there are probably feeling the same way and knowing they're not the only one. And Selena, what would be your favorite self-confidence quote?
This is one that has actually made a big difference in my own life, but also with the people that I coach and train. And it's about when you stop giving so much power to what if I fail? And it's actually taking failure out of the equation and shifting it to, this is my quote, I'm either going to win or I'm going to learn. Seeing all opportunities like that, like your next book, Sheena, or my next book. I'm either going to win or I'm going to learn. I'm not going to obsess about failure and what if I fall down? What if I don't get a great reception? What if we could do that to ourselves forever. And it really sidelines us and is pretty terrible for our health when we ruminate like that. So I've taken to adopting that mantra. I'm either going to win or I'm going to learn. And it really helps me shift the perspective from failure to growth and maybe even gives a little more self-compassion, that I can be resilient.
I love that quote, especially when it comes to failure. I mean, in Asian culture, failure is seen as like the end of all end, thinking it's the worst thing that could happen when really failure can be the best thing that can happen, right? It teaches us to be resilient, to build confidence, to have courage, to keep moving forward regardless of the circumstances. And it's so true, right? Like I have the same concept when it comes to being in situations. Sometimes we're in situations and back then it'd be like, why am I in this situation? Now I pre-frame it to say, okay, something must be coming out of this because I'm in this situation for a reason. It's either a blessing or a lesson. And the more we can see things from that perspective, it just makes things a lot lighter. And then, you'll find the answer later on in life, even if it gets frustrating and you're like, but I don't get it. But I love that you had that same concept as well. And in your own words, how would you define self-confidence?
It's evolved over the years for sure, but I come to think of someone with self-confidence as someone who has a healthy respect for their strengths. So that when they forecast into the future, right, it's not that they think I'm better than everybody or I deserve this more than everyone else. It's that they look at an opportunity and they're able to say, I have as good a shot at this as anybody else. And that might sound like a small thing, just to give yourself the permission slip that I'm enough. I'm enough today, not 2 years from now and with an MBA and 5 more years of experience, right? But I am enough now. And I think people who operate with self-confidence move with that thinking, move throughout the world with that thinking that I'm going to go for it. And I think another thing they do that is special and important is, so many people say to me like, but what's the line between self-confidence and arrogance? And I bet you get that too, Sheena, that type of question. But I would almost say, I think we over index on worrying about that, especially women. And what I try to remind people is to actually think about some of the risks of being underconfident. Because we tend to think, oh, that's a safe place to be, to kind of go in your turtle shell and not take any risks, not do anything. But what about the missed opportunities? When you're underconfident, what about that kind of defeated before you try mindset? The failure to speak up or stand up for something that's really important to you, maybe even for someone else. So I think one of the things we can do is worry a little less about what if I come off as too much, right? And balance that thinking with what if I barely make my presence felt? Is that okay with me? To not speak up, to not raise my hand for this opportunity that excites me. I think that can help push us a little more towards that happy medium.
I love that definition and thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, I always get that question. What if seem arrogant or you're too much? And I always tell people you're not going to please everybody. You're going to have haters. I mean, it's just part of when you're forging your own path and being visible. But I tell people when you have a good intention, it's fine, right? Like you have good intentions to make a positive difference in the world and you just go for it. And I know it can be scary, and as women, we get judged a lot more than men. That's a known fact. But if we don't do these things, then it's the same cycle and over again. So thanks for sharing that definition. And Selena, what was your life like before your discovery of self-confidence?
Well, I was most certainly more fearful to ask for something. Maybe that was ask for a change to the timeline, ask for a raise at work, ask for more responsibility or the really exciting project. So definitely fear around making requests of other people. This really makes me cringe because it was so uncomfortable for me to remember it, but just a lot of permission seeking, apologizing for taking up space, like thinking if I was knocking on a director's door, just doing my job, that like I somehow had to hurry through my words or say, I'm sorry for bothering you. I know you're so busy. I was busy too, and I diminished myself, I think, before I had a sense of that self confidence. Now I would never say that. I would never say, as I knock on the door, I'm so sorry to bother you, or let me hurry up and ask you my final question so you can get on with your important day. No, no, we're all important. We're all busy, and we can speak to each other like respected peers, without having to put somebody up on a pedestal. And I think just one other thing was I think I had smaller prospects in my life. I think I was more prone to tell myself no before they did. Again, thinking about a lot of the what ifs. For example, I always had a dream to get an MBA and I put it off for several years because I kind of believed that inner voice that was like, what if I fail? Of course, it ended up after doing it being one of the like most enriching things, something I'm so, so glad I did. But wow, that voice inside, whether it's a critic or a champion, is powerful.
Thanks for sharing that and being so vulnerable. It's not always easy to, like you mentioned, it's cringy, right? Like especially, we feel like we always have to seek permission for something when we don't. We are more than enough to go out there, make changes, stay in our power, make up space, take up space, speak out. And that's why it's important as women we go out there and do it so that other women can see like, oh, it is okay. Because it really is. And I know it's not easy, it's tough. We get more criticism than men, of course, because as women, that's just how it is, unfortunately. Like, hopefully one day that changes. The more we step up, the more we can be in our true power. And what was that point in your life when you realized you were more than enough? Especially being a speaker, writing books, it's not really typical to have, women of colors, authors in traditional publishing industry. If you look at the numbers, it's like 75% Caucasian male. And so, I mean, being able to write even 4 books, that's amazing. But what was that aha moment that made you realize you were more than enough to make it happen?
Yes, well, thank you for that. That's so nice of you, and right back at you because I'm constantly inspired by you and your authoring and your books. But here's what I'll say. It actually came this big lightning moment for me as a young woman, not recently, like I'm talking teen years. And as a teenager, I had dreams, like a lot of us, to go to college one day. But we lost my dad very suddenly when I was a teenager. And we were devastated. Obviously, we really struggled to pick up the pieces, and we struggled more financially from that time on as a family. Well, fast forward several years to college time. I had found a college I loved. I had gotten in, and they had agreed to give me some financial aid. And my amazing mom, um, if anyone has a single mom, they know they are the masters of doing a lot with a little bit. And that's what my mom did. She kind of scrimped together the remainder to send me there, right? That the financial aid wouldn't cover. Well, I went. I loved it, Sheena. I like loved this place, felt I belonged. And I get the financial aid for year two. And lo and behold, the $8 are way smaller. And my mom like sat me down at our kitchen table with like pain in her eyes. And she was like, honey, I can't send you back. I'm sorry. And I knew in that moment at like 18, if anything is going to change the course of where this is headed, it has to be me. I have to do something. And so I did the only thing I could think of. I wrote a long appeal letter to the financial aid office. And I said, look, uh, here are all the reasons I want to be at this university, how I want to contribute to the community. Here are the 3,000 jobs I'll do on campus to make it worth it to you. But please keep me here. Consider changing this aid package. And to my shock, they said yes. And they changed those $8, not just for year two, but for year three and year four, so I could finish. And they gave me all those jobs, by the way, too. So I made my way through different offices and circuits. But I think I realized in that moment as a young woman that like politeness, reserve, restraint was not going to help me solve this problem. It was asking, it was assertiveness, it was communication, it was directness, it was making a case, that if anything was going to get me out of what felt really awful, it was going to be those things. And so I also learned, and I'm sure you can relate to this, that you can have loved ones in your corner, at work, you can have sponsors and mentors who are rooting for you. Nobody is going to ask on your behalf. Like you have to be your own chief negotiator in life. You have to be your own vocal advocate. And boy, was that a learning moment that changed, I think, the rest of my life and made me realize, oh, I do have a voice. And sometimes using your voice can change your life.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm a big believer in asking. The worst they could say is no, but at least you went for it, right? Imagine if you didn't ask what your life would have been like, right? Would you have finished school? Would you have done something differently? Or would you have to work three jobs just to pay for tuition? And you asked and gave your reason why, and they said yes. And not only was it for that 1 year, it was for the remainder of your college years, right? And it led you to where you are today. So, because of that moment, what's your life been like now?
So I love the topic of self-advocacy so much. And I'm such a believer in what a fantastic tool it is in your career that I dedicated an entire book of mine to that topic, specifically for women. And it's called Pushback. And it just came out this year in its second edition, totally updated and revised. I think it's such a critically important thing. We can be the smartest in the room. We can be the best prepared. We can have the best intentions. If we're not willing to advocate for the plan, the idea, ourselves, someone else, we don't have much. So I see this as not a nice to have skill, but a must have. And one, by the way, Sheena, that I'm constantly practicing myself because you kind of hinted at this earlier, but for many of us who grew up with certain conditioning, to take just enough, don't ask for too much, don't inconvenience others, be accommodating. It can take a long time to unbecome those things. And so this is a practice I myself am keeping up, even if I'm training thousands of women in it too.
Thanks for sharing that. And I totally, I'm with you on that, especially showing up, being visible. I mean, it's not easy because currently we're facing a huge confidence gap between men and women. That's, why there's less women in leadership. And like you mentioned, sometimes it's us up to us, even if those conditions aren't always the greatest, right? It's the reason why I wrote the second book, Bridging the Confidence Gap, because we need more women leaders out there. And the more women we have out, the better the world is. It's not just women that benefits, the whole world benefits. So really grateful that you're not, there's someone out there who's doing the same thing, being an advocate for themselves, putting themselves out there. And it's not easy, right? People see you and I, they probably think, oh, they have all the confidence in the world, when it's like the total opposite, but it's necessary so that we can create the positive change. And to the woman who's listening to your episode, she may be in her own journey to self-confidence. What would be that one tip you would give to her?
Well, I think it really dovetails with what you were just saying, Sheena, which is don't take self-doubt or moments of imposter feelings as signals that you shouldn't do something. Expect self-doubt. Know that that awkwardness you're feeling just means that you're new at something, that this is new to you. This is a different challenge. And I like to say to people, we all have these heroes in our minds, these uber successful people that we call to mind. And we tend to think of them as being like doubt-free. Somehow they've made it, they've arrived, they no longer have things such as self-doubts. And I would really challenge that thinking that there's a time we arrive. I think we can get to more comfort, that we can have that healthy respect for our strengths and be willing to speak to our strengths, for sure. But realize that a well-lived life is not cushy and soft and permanently doubt-free, right? That person who you think is so successful over there, I guarantee they have imposter thoughts. And so see your own as proof that you're challenging yourself, that you are pushing your edge and your comfort zone. You can wear it with pride. And it's just a different way to reframe, I think, some of those self-doubt thoughts that can feel yucky to most of us. Don't take it as that signal of where to go.
Thanks for sharing that great tip. And if our listeners wanted to get to know a little bit more about you and what you do, pick up some of your books or all of your books, is there any links or social media profiles we can connect with?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is I create content 5 days a week, video content on TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn as well. And so I'm at Selena Rezvani on all of those platforms. I hope you'll check those out and leave me a comment or say hello. And you can find my books, Quick Confidence, Pushback, The Next Generation of Women Leaders, anywhere books are sold.
Thanks for sharing that. To our listeners, if you want to connect with Selena, you can also head on over to thetaoofselfconfidence.com and search for Selena's name. Her show notes will pop up along with everything else that we talked about. And I just want to thank Selena for taking the time to share her story and wisdom on confidence. Thank you so much, Selena.
Thank you, Sheena, and thank you for being such an ongoing source of inspiration yourself.
Oh, thank you. It's such an honor to have you on the show. And to our listeners, be on the lookout for another new episode of another amazing woman's journey to self-confidence, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. You can now purchase The Tao of Self-Confidence, a guide to moving beyond trauma and awakening the leader within on Amazon, Barnes & Noble's, Walmart, Indigo, and other major book retailers. Get your copy today. Thank you for tuning in to another amazing episode of The Tao of Self-Confidence. You can order your copy of Asian Women Who Boss Up book by visiting our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits.